Hello, welcome to Discourse in Third Person, a podcast where we talk about video games, looking at them through different dimensions. I'm Josh, and this is Jeffrey.
Hey,
For today's episode, we're going to talk about Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, technically the sixth installment in the Assassin's Creed series. It tells the story of Edward Kenway, a Welsh pirate in the Caribbean during the golden age of piracy. While seeking his fortune as a maritime ne'er-do-well, Edward finds himself embroiled into the multi-epoch civilization spanning vendetta between Templar and Assassin. So, Jeffrey, what's your history with Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag?
I had played every single Assassin's Creed up through this point. So when it came out, I was excited for it because always enjoyed pirate games. When it comes to Pirates Gold back on the Sega Genesis, to Sid Meier's Pirates, in the mid 2000s. So when Black Flag came out, I was excited because it was kind of putting together two things I really loved, which is again Assassin's Creed games. I really enjoyed them, and pirates. I love pirate games. How about you?
This was before my obsession, well, my interest with everything maritime. Even then, I very much enjoyed pirate games as well. I don't share the same history you have with playing Sid Meier's Pirates, but I think the movie Pirates of the Caribbean was very influential to me playing this game because pirates are cool, right? Also, I did play the Assassin's Creed series myself, so I think we're on the same boat on that front. I love Assassin's Creed. I like pirates. Seems like a match made in heaven.
Hello, Jeffrey Chang here. We begin with topic 1, the protagonist Kenway. Topic 2, assassins and Templars. And finally, topic 3, life on the digital sea. And again, there will be spoilers. Here's topic 1.
In terms of the plot of the game itself, you play as
An Ubisoft game developer.
quote unquote Ubisoft. They call him Abstergo in this one. But as you know, the main narrative frame of it is that you are playing memories of a historical figure. In this particular instance, it's Edward Kenway, a pirate during the golden age of piracy. So you go through the Caribbean, you rub elbows with key historical figures: Edward Thatch, Charles Vane, Jack Rackham, Anne Bonny, Mary Read, so on and so forth. What's interesting to note is that you play as Edward Kenway, and his plot involves him trying to get money, trying to get riches, and in that pursuit of greed, he stumbles upon pretty much the Templar assassins conflict.
He stumbles on it entirely by accident.
So, in essence, Edward Kenway, through various machinations, damns the assassins, he plays the Templars, but eventually he finds that the real treasure was the friends you made along the way. Really.
Yeah, there's also a whole plot with the assassins about trying to find uh, what was it called?
The observatory.
The Templars and assassins are trying to find this observatory where if you put a little bit of blood of a person's blood in a cube and put it in this device, you can see what they're seeing in real time. So essentially, a very powerful spying device.
It's a mystical version of Big Brother's watch. It's an Orwellian construct, isn't it?
Yeah, it is very much so. I feel that in some ways it kind of does remind me of the One Ring of Power from the Lord of the Rings. The people that are most tempted by it are the people in power.
Okay, and we're talking about the observatory, or I guess in this case, any tool of sufficient omnipotence.
Right. I mean both of those tools because the One Ring enhances the natural abilities of its wearer as well. So it became very tempting for kings, for people that rule over people, because it's tempting to have your abilities enhanced in the belief that it will help the populace. But of course, the ring corrupts the person that wields it. And again, I feel like it does kind of strikes a similar vein in that regard, where the observatory, it does give the wielder power, but that kind of knowing everything about people, about knowing what they're doing at all times, is a power that can corrupt as well.
And the assassins want to keep it away from people. The Templars want to use it.
Right. So I guess the main thing about Edward Kenway is that obviously the initial motivation is very simple. He wants money. It's,
Yeah, he's a greedy fellow. Yeah,
I mean, he's a privateer through and through, a very definition of a privateer. Leading up before the events of the game, he was a privateer. And then
well, okay. So Jeffrey, as you know, the difference between a privateer and a pirate is that
one is sanctioned by the crown and one is not.
exactly. And usually you get a lot of privateers when there's war, right?
Right.
But
The war ended.
the war ended. There's a lot of skilled people out in the Caribbean. They already have the stuff. They already have the people. They're not getting paid. So
Yo ho ho time.
yo ho ho time.
So he pretty much gets sworn in as a Templar by pretending to be a assassin turncoat. He gets found out to be a fraud, and then he steals a ship.
Right. Meets Adewale, a very important figure in the growth of Edward Kenway as a character.
Right. I mean, he meets quite a few other pirates, and then they go on this arc of trying to create essentially a pirate run haven, a pirate republic
Nassau.
in Nassau. So I guess the one of the problems of nobody being in charge and no one organizing things is that nothing productive was happening, and I mean, essentially Nassau was a failed state, right?
It was absolutely a fail state, at least in terms of the game.
You know, going back to Kenway, he has this plot where we see flashbacks where she's with this woman, Caroline Scott, who becomes disowned by her father for falling in love with Edward Kenway.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, Edward's response is, okay, I'm going to join and become a privateer and make my fortunes,
Take to the seas.
take to the seas and make my fortune that way. And he promised her that he would only be gone 2 years at the most.
2 years at the most.
And essentially, we then see that, okay, more than 2 years has passed before the beginning of the game, right?
They both knew. Both Caroline and Edward knew. That would not be the case.
Right. It was kind of already a foregone conclusion. It was an unspoken truth.
Exactly, exactly.
And I guess that's something that kind of weighed on me when I originally played this game. I always felt like that was the main thrust. I always felt like the time was ticking on Kenway getting back to her without destroying the fiber of himself and her as well. And in some ways that did play out in the game.
So Assassin's Creed 4 is more of a it's an introspective journey, isn't it? It's an examination of Edward Kenway's character than it is the Templar assassin conflict.
Right. And I felt like that was a better direction to go. I felt like Assassin's Creed 2, you had a lot of that, but it tied in well with the Assassin's plotline because it was a plotline of vengeance, and the vengeance was happened to be against the Templars. I thought where Assassin's Creed Black Flag kind of wasn't cohesive was, all right, Edward's main thrust is to make money and get back to Caroline. And then he goes and around with the assassins and Templars. And it just doesn't seem very intuitive. Like it doesn't seem very cohesive with the rest of the story. There's, he does make some mentions of how if he could get his hands on the observatory, he would make 100 times what a Spanish galleon, a Spanish treasure fleet could give him.
Okay.
But I guess this is where things can break down between what the occurrences in the game and the plot itself. Because you can just keep raiding ships and you can gain quite a lot of money. I did some rudimentary calculations. If you fully upgrade your ship,
Right.
that's the equivalent of 9 million US dollars today.
That's a lot of money.
And so, I mean, it's like, okay, how much money do you really need to be set? Not just be set, well off, even.
There's that concept rearing its ugly head. That little thing called ludonarrative dissonance.
Ludonarrative dissonance.
Dear listener, just in case you're not aware, ludonarrative dissonance is this idea that in video games, especially in such an interactive medium as this, ludonarrative dissonance is wherein the exigencies of being a game, that is the ability, for example, the ability to accrue so much money, sort of eclipses or invalidates the narrative.
Yeah,
For example, in GTA 4, Nico Bellic is searching for a new life, but you could just go on a rampage.
right.
So the character in gameplay is different from the character in cutscenes. That's an example of ludonarrative dissonance.
Right, right.
Interesting. Okay, okay.
I just felt like the set aside how much money that you can make in the game.
Sure.
I just felt like trying to put together these two plot lines did not really make sense, and is why I just felt such a divide between, all right, the assassins part of the game and, all right, I'm a pirate part of the game. The piracy portion of the game, in my opinion, was much more interesting because it directly related much more to Edward Kenway's main goal, which is making enough money to get back to Caroline Scott.
Right, right.
At one part of the game, the king's pardon is offered, and if you don't know, the king's pardon is essentially, all right, I know all of y'all been pirating. We'll give you a pardon as long as you put aside all your piracy and swear fealty to the king. Is that right?
Governor Woods comes into Nassau Pirate Republic, and this was 2 years into the failed experiment of Nassau as a pirate republic. Governor Woods offers the Pirate Brotherhood the king's pardon. Go join us, and we'll pardon you for your crimes and whatnot. If not, we're going to hang all of you. And it was a big plot point in the game.
So my main problem is that, all right, if Kenway made enough money, and it's not really well established whether he made enough money at this point, but you got a ship, you should have a good amount of money at this point,
Okay.
or some
Right.
amount of money. By all means, he should take the king's pardon so he could get back to Caroline Scott.
Okay.
But he decides to continue stealing stuff and doing this assassin's plot in the Caribbean still, which I felt conflicted with what his character would have done.
So, interestingly enough, I actually felt the opposite of that, Jeffrey. So, he doesn't, right? Even if he has all the money, even if he's accrued the riches that he needs to just go back to Carolyn Scott, it does beg the question, why doesn't he just go back, right? He has the means, but he feels that it is still inadequate. He's unable to see he has reached his goal. I feel that in the game, prior to being introduced to the assassins, I think Kenway's character would not have permitted himself to leave the Caribbean because he's this insatiable hole of wanting more, of this ambition, of this greed, of this self centeredness, and he would just mask it, or at least I felt its way. He would always just excuse or camouflage his greed, his gluttony, with the idea of, I have to get enough money to settle Carolyn Scott. If I go back now, I'm just going to be as poor and as much of a peasant as I was when I left.
Okay, so kind of a self sabotage
Right.
aspect to his character.
And there is evidence for this because in every single assassination, the cutscene where it kind of just goes into the matrix, where everything becomes devoid of any detail, and you have this one-to-one, heart-to-heart conversation with your
Quarry.
quarry or your target. They keep mentioning, "Oh, you're just in it for yourself. You're a man without conviction. All this energy, all this fire and temper, but where is this really going?" And other characters point to it as well. Mary Reed even says it herself, wherein she calls out Edward Kenway for being so selfish. right?
Right.
So I believe he would not have permitted himself as a character. He would not have gone back. Even if he had the riches, he just would not let himself go for it. So I think in those terms, I don't know if it was particularly well done or not, but it's when he finds conviction, that's when he makes the realization. And when does he actually make the turn? When does he actually switch from I'm a self centered, greedy jerk, who he himself admitted it's hard to be my friend when he was talking to Adewale.
Right.
It wasn't until, honestly, Mary died, where she says, I've done the work, continue it for me, or something like.
To that effect.
And he goes back to the assassin's village. And just to clarify this point, early on in the game, you actually fight assassins. You actually kill assassins yourself, right? As
Right.
Edward Kenway, you foil an assassination attempt on the Templars because Edward was still masquerading as a Templar at that point.
Right.
So you kill assassins. Also, not only that, but you sell maps to the Templars and you do undue damage to the assassin's village. And it's not until years later that Edward goes to the village himself and seeks some form of restitution, some form of forgiveness from the mentor. So it was through the realization that all this drive, all this ambition was nothing if it weren't for the people that you could spend it with. Because at that point, man, all of his friends and the people he gets close to almost always died. You have Edward Thatch. He failed in saving his friend Edward Thatch.
Yeah.
He failed saving Mary Reed. Charles Vane, he eventually went insane, but still, at some point, he considered him a friend.
Right.
All these people, all the people that he cared for and loved in the Caribbean, all of them gone. And it wasn't until he was it the Delirium episode
Yeah.
where he made that realization. And I think that was the turning point from the selfish, self-centered man to at least he could appreciate having people with him and
Yeah.
it's not just personal gain
Right.
that matters.
And he does outright say it. And I think that's why the ending of the game was so satisfying, right? If
Right.
we do take it all the way to the end, he explicitly says, "For all the riches I've gained, I don't have a single person beside me that loves me."
Even Carolyn died, right?
Right. Carolyn died. It was alluded to that she was sick. Then she subsequently passed away. And then we have this beautiful ending song.
Absolutely.
And I really feel the highlight of the game was its ending. Unlike
Mhm. Mhm.
quite a few other Assassin's Creed games, the ending was amazing in terms of the him seeing the friends that are now departed. Half of them he killed himself, to be honest. Let's ignore that for this beautiful moment.
Right. Or see him like die in front of him, yes, violently so.
He sees his friends in at the table. Then he goes down to the dock side, picks a flower along the way from the side of the road,
Uh-huh.
and then his daughter steps off the ship. And it was a beautiful moment, and I think the best way to end this game.
Absolutely.
Topic 2: Assassins and Templars.
Interestingly enough, in Assassin's Creed Black Flag, there's a lot of intimacy with the Templars and well, there's a lot of camaraderie. I don't know. I don't quite know how to explain it, but I'll give you an example. Maybe you could help me out with this. So, because Edward Kenway is our protagonist, and he's not actually part of the assassins. His conversations with his enemies, his targets, really, if you look at it, they do make interesting points. They do make good points. And if you notice, the Templars, they always have the high ground. They always have the moral high ground. Case in point, when you assassinate Hornigold, Ben Hornigold is one of the former pirates that accepts the king's pardon and is inducted to the Templars order. When you assassinate him, he calls Edward Kenway out for pretty much being someone who has no conviction whatsoever. He's a man who's just chaos and ruin,
Right.
and Hornigold believed in something. He truly believed in the structure and the discipline that the Templars represent. And if you recall, he lamented the failed experiment of Nassau, Ben Hornigold. And so it's interesting how your enemies actually do, they're the ones calling Edward out.
Right. It's not undeserved. Yeah, so the main issue that I had in terms of the Assassin Templar conflict
Sure.
was, again, we're going back, pirates. Pirate Haven, Pirate Republic, maximum freedom versus, you talk about the Templars. They're really espousing again, big brother mindset. We're going to take the observatory and we're going to construct the new world order that will be
Mhm.
better for everyone.
Mhm.
And in some ways, I felt that, okay, they showed that there's an issue when no one runs anything because what you get is pretty much
Anarchy,
anarchy and pestilence
ruin,
and ruin. And
disease.
but the part of that the game didn't explore well was, this is what the pirates were going after, and then some of these are espoused by the assassins, right? Some of these concepts of liberty are also espoused by the assassins.
Mhm.
And then on the opposite side of the coin, there are the Templars. They didn't really show the dark side of authoritarianism as much or well. They kind of alluded to it. They basically end up blackmailing the whole of the British Parliament or something like that. Each Templar individually seemed to have pretty reasonable convictions about what they were doing and why. Because when it really comes down to it, a lot of them wanted a just society that isn't given to just having pirates going around and just stealing things. That's an awful society.
Mhm.
But it also didn't really explore, okay, what are the downsides of authoritarianism? All right, it crushes people, it crushes dissenters. In this case, the dissenters were pretty much just pirate. I mean, that's reasonable, though, I guess is what I'm saying. As you said, the Templars made very valid points and their motivations were very valid. And so, yeah, essentially, there's people that are vying for power and they say that order and a just society is their goal. And that's generally fine, but the problem is that when you have authoritarianism, the abuses of power a lot of the time naturally come with it because you're relying on one person not to abuse the power. And it views dissent as chaos and breaking the law, even if it's peaceful dissent.
It's definitely a lot more philosophical. They do allude to what the Templars would do to it, as you mentioned. I believe when Edward was explaining it to Anne, the violence that it would wreak would be subtle, but the magnitude of it would be far-reaching. How do you feel about Assassin's Creed, the series itself? And this is something that pretty much maligned, or at least it's what a lot of people complain about when it comes to the Assassin's Creed series. I mean, I think you yourself said this would have been a lot better without the Templar Assassin conflict, right?
Right. I might say something really controversial here.
Sure, go ahead.
I don't think Ubisoft knows what the frick they're doing when it comes to the precursors. I think they stuck that in there in order to, put these powerful artifacts in the history of the game history. So you have these powerful artifacts. They do incredible things. Where did they come from? They were precursors
Of course.
from beyond space and time.
Sure.
Okay, sure, but then they never really revealed that much about what are the precursors doing? Why are they doing this? What does this have to do with assassins and
Okay.
Templars? What
Okay.
I don't think they really understand or they really have an idea of what they're doing with that plot line.
So, for the record, and I'm just going to cover my base here, I'm going to throw you completely under the bus here, Jeffrey.
Oh, throw away. Be my guest.
I've only played Assassin's Creed 1, 2, Revelations, Brotherhood, and Black Flag, some of Unity. So, and I've never played 3 or anything else. So, maybe they've explored the connections. Isn't there like a comic book series as well?
I don't know. It doesn't exist. It's dead to me.
But but I'm pretty sure it's in the wiki somewhere, Jeffrey. So I'm just gonna Pontius Pilate this, and I'm gonna wash my hands of that. I'm gonna disclaimer it.
See, the thing that clues me in that they don't know
Sure.
what they're doing is that this was something that they stuck in two. It wasn't. There was none of this in one, right?
The artifacts, dude. The Apple of Eden
Right.
was. It's been a hot minute since I played Assassin's Creed One, but
Right.
definitely Assassin's Creed One had the Apple of Eden,
The Apple of Eden.
all sorts of magic.
Right. But two, they had like shards that you could gain that gave you like a 3 second clip
Right,
of
right, right.
something that you goes by too fast to know.
I remember having fun with those riddles. Those were fun.
Did you now?
The puzzles, yes. I liked them. I liked them as because they had the ARG or alternate reality game sort of vibe to them, which kind of makes sense in the Assassin's Creed conspiracy theme or feel that they're going.
I think they wrote it in, and then they did expand upon it in Assassin's Creed Revelations. Again, this was 2012. Assassin's Creed Revelation. Oh, 2012 going to be the end of the world. Only you can stop it, Desmond. This is like one of the precursor gods talking to Desmond. I just feel like they put it in there to explain it, and they're just making it up as they go along.
Okay,
But what do you think?
so again, the Assassin's Creed games seem to try and evoke this conspiracy thriller vibe or aspect to the game itself, spanning centuries from the very beginning of written history, even before of written history. There's the threads that bind all these historic events together. And what could it possibly be but just precursors, aliens, a grander conspiracy than just the Templar assassins? Because if it weren't for a grander conspiracy, why are the Templars and assassins even fighting? At least I felt that way.
Okay.
So I get it, and the convoluted nature of it is also what they're trying to invoke or evoke, as mentioned. But I could see why it would be frustrating. It kind of feels pretty J.J. Abramsy mystery box like.
Right. It feels like Lost, television series. All right, we're gonna throw a mystery in here, and I guess we'll at some point we'll pick it up
All
later.
right, it's such a great conspiracy. Even I don't know what's
I
going on.
exactly,
Right,
exactly.
right. Okay.
Topic 3: Life on the Digital Sea.
Some couple things that we just want to just get off our chest.
Right. Okay.
So I want to talk about two things, and they're very minor points, and I just thought they were neat. This is just some
Yeah.
cool, neat little things. So the subtitles for Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Did you
Yeah.
notice how the capitalization is odd?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't. So if you go back to Assassin's Creed Black Flag and watch the
Yeah.
cutscenes with the subtitles on, you'd notice how seemingly random nouns get capitalized.
Yeah.
That's a nice touch because actually
The emphasis, or
it's just the way printing was back then. Actually,
oh, really?
yeah, I have a copy of A General History of the Pirates here by Daniel Defoe, and randomly words or nouns are capitalized. And spelling, as you know, spelling there wasn't a standardized spelling for it,
Right.
and just a random sense that I have. Lothar did all that he could do and said all that he could say to dissuade Massey from so rash and dangerous an attempt. Dissuade is spelled Disswade, and attempt is the last word in that clause. It's
Yeah.
capitalized. So
That's weird.
it's just I don't know. It's just a nice little detail, historical detail in Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag.
I loved the. I think you'll agree the sea shanties.
Yeah, absolutely. The soundscape in this game is top notch.
Yeah, being able to just sail your ship around the Caribbean, and then the wind's at your back and the sun is shining and your crew members are running around and climbing up and unfurling the sails. It's a pretty fantastic feeling.
Oh, do you like the automatic setting sails? You want to go from neutral to 1 to 3 to 4?
Yeah. Unfurl sails. All right, got him, coach. Well, they run around, they run up the rigging and do it right. I mean,
They do, but
it's way
I
too
mean,
fast. Like, how long would it take to like do that?
For one thing, you need a lot more people to do that, right?
Right.
So for running a rigging, the ships in that game were very fast,
Right.
very very fast. For the people who are not in the know, a knot is 1.1 miles per hour, and going 10 knots is already quite fast in terms of square rig sailing ships. So I mean, it's a game, right? It's a video game first and foremost,
Right.
and you could absolutely what was it rationalize it by being it's the Animus, so we don't want any of that boring stuff.
Right. I mean, and I appreciate that about the game where okay, you can rationalize most everything with it's the animus baby. And in some way I'm glad for that because it's not a perfect historical game and it's the feeling of sailing rather than the actual act of sailing, which is a blessing.
I would prefer verisimilitude over simulationist every single day. I'd rather have a facsimile that's entertaining. Anyway, so the other thing
Yeah.
that I would just like to just get off my chest, I just think is neat. So in the Delirium episode, the chapter when after Mary dies and
Edward on a drink.
Edward goes into super exactly drinks himself to a hallucination. I didn't realize this, but do you know what the name of his ship is?
Edward ship, the jackdaw.
The Jackdaw. So in that episode, you have Woodes Rogers. That's his name, the governor. Woodes Rogers is proselytizing, just preaching in front of a crowd, and he starts talking about a fable, an Aesop fable, and the Aesop's fable was the eagle and the jackdaw. And listening to it again, do you know the Aesop, the fable?
Not at all. I never heard of that.
So one day, an eagle was flying, and the eagle swooped down to grab its prey. The jackdaw sees this and wants to imitate the eagle, and
Yep.
so it does it itself, right? It swoops down,
Right.
and seeing its prey, he chose a ram for its prey, and so he swoops in, tries to grab it, and exerts a mighty force, just a lot of energy to try and lift it, but the ram doesn't even notice it there. The farmer, seeing this interesting development, runs up to the jackdaw and clips its wing. And he brings the jackdaw to his house to show it to his children. And the children remarks how an interesting bird it is.
Well, see that's very interesting. Go on.
That is interesting. And obviously you could make the allegory, the analogy between that Aesop, that fable with Edward Kenway. And in fact, it's inviting us to do so. I mean, the ship is called the Jackdaw, and a character in the video game actually says it out loud, right?
And the assassins, of course, are very associated with eagles.
Eagles, right? I mean, well, I never played Assassin's Creed 3, but I do know the ship was called the Aquila, right?
Right.
Right. So that's particularly interesting. And so it also says about how Edward is first pretended to be a Templar and then pretended to be an assassin. I think Edward's story in Assassin's Creed 4 is more of a continuation or a revisionist version of the fable itself. Because in the game, in the delusion, the person who was saying that Aesop was an enemy, was a Templar. But by Edward's development as a character, he proves to himself, because it was actually just a delirium, he proves to himself that even though he is a jackdaw, a jackdaw could learn to be an eagle. So I thought that was neat, just the parallels of that Aesop. I mean, it was pretty heavy-handed, but it was neat. It was cool.
I completely went over my head. I thank you for sharing that. So, Josh, what are your last thoughts on Assassin's Creed 4?
So as an Assassin's Creed game, looking back at it, examining it back, I think it holds pretty well. I mean, there's still as a pirate game, as a standalone pirate game, I think it's still unparalleled. I mean, there's just hasn't been a AAA game that really captures that same feeling.
Yeah, right. I mean, obviously, Ubisoft is working on Skull and Bones,
At the time of this recording, it still hasn't gone out.
and probably not not at the time of listening for quite a few years based on their progress. But it was a very enjoyable pirate game for me, but a mediocre Assassin's Creed game,
That's fair.
in my opinion. It felt more like a great pirate game and a again, a mediocre Assassin's Creed game. The motivations I felt didn't really mesh well with the Assassin's Creed portions.
I forgot, and this is maybe because I was a bit younger and I didn't really realize it. But looking back at it, examining, and I'm really glad for this project for allowing me to revisit it. I didn't realize how compelling of a character Edward was. I mean, I knew he was cool. I knew he was great. But looking back at it, I get to appreciate more of the character work, the writing for Edward's character. I'm not necessarily saying the overall arching narrative of it. I do agree with you with the Assassin Templar. It served its purpose, I feel, as a means for Edward's development. If I just look at it as Edward's story and less of an Assassin's Creed story, I think I could rationalize my ambivalence towards this game.
All right, but we'll both agree that the ending of Assassin's Creed 4 was fantastic.
Ending wise, yes, it was dramatic. It was I felt earned with the amount of suffering that Kenway went through. So
Definitely. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll have more episodes up soon, and have yourself a great day.